My respected elders, my sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our commemorations of the Azhar, of the Muharram, Safar period, they are coming to an end. But this temporal period of time does not bring an end to our commitment to the ideals of Abu Abdullah, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussain, alayhi salatu wassalam, and his Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and his sublime and remarkable sacrifice that he and his loved ones, his family members, his women and his children made on the day of Ashura and beyond. I have attempted this month or two to remind myself first and foremost and the fellow believers of why we are told to commemorate and to be with those who shed tears and mourn Imam Hussain. And a reason, and perhaps the most important reason, is because of the demonstrative Iman, faith, that they on the plains of Karbala demonstrated on that blessed and important day. They showed us how we are to live and how we are to die. On the wall here, there's a very beautiful slogan here: live like Ali, die like Hussein. And so on the day of Ashura, we learned about both and what it means to not just talk the talk, but to walk the walk. And so to have that commitment to God, that unflinching and unconditional love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you find on the sands of Karbala on that day. But my question tonight, inshallah, is what happens when you choose not to have that love of God, and instead you choose to love the alternative, which is to love the world, to love the material possessions that we have in our pockets, or to aspire to the world, to have hubb al-dunya. What happens to an individual when they decide to make that decision? We know that a believer is meant to love God and to be committed to Him, the source of all goodness, all honor, all karama, all dignity. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you decide to love something else, to love the material world, to aspire to make that your ilah, your aspiration, your God, what happens? Now, we know that the world is not an evil place. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not create evil. He does not create anything batil. He did it with a purpose, with a reason. In fact, the world is a beautiful place. In the world, you will find the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But someone who decides to make their ultimate aspiration the dunya, again, there's nothing wrong with the dunya, but these material things in the world that Allah swears by, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the material world. And if Allah swears by it, it means it has value. It's beautiful, it's important. But such a person who focuses and fixates themselves on the world is like that person who has heard that they are going to go on a vacation, a road trip. And so they make their destination and they say, we are going to go to Ali Beg. Where do you want to go? Disney World. Okay? I can tell that he wants to go to Disney World after Muharram is over, inshallah. He wants to go to Disney World. And so they make their trip, they pack their bags, they're ready to go, they fill up their gas tanks, or they fill up their, what do Teslas have? I don't even know. Batteries. They charge their batteries, and they're on their way. And then Ali Beg is looking, and he sees Disney World written there on that green big sign. And so he gets in his car, he drives to the sign, and he gets out. And he shuts his car off, and then he starts hugging the pole of the sign. Oh, I love Disney World. MashaAllah, Disney World is so great. And we're all looking at Ali Beg and we're wondering, what's wrong with Ali Beg? Didn't we tell you to go to, didn't you tell us you're going to Disney World? He said, yeah, I'm here, I'm at Disney World. The sign says Disney World. But I promise you, Ali Beg, with all due respect to you, he is confused. Right? Because the signpost that directs you to your destination is not the same as your destination. And so when you look at the sun, you look at the moon, you look at the faces of your parents, you look at the universe, you study biology, you study science, you reflect on your soul, and most of all, you look at the face of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wasalam. All of these are signs of God, and they're meant to take you somewhere else. They're meant to take you to our ultimate destination. And so don't get stuck here. Right? Go to our destination. Go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what happens if you don't go to your destination? Instead, you decide to stay here. You fall in love with this place. The Quran tells us that two things happen. All of you know that we need food to eat. If we want to sustain our bodies, we know that we have to put some stuff in it. But we know that not every creature requires the same food. Right? Our bodies, they require fruits and vegetables and sometimes some meat. Right? Don't make your stomach a graveyard, as Amir al-Mu'mineen said. But enjoy meat, it's good. But we need to eat healthy, right? We need to give our bodies what it needs. But if you give, for example, a bird, you give them biryani and rice, you know what happens to that bird? Apparently, or that pigeon, I think it's pigeons, this happens that it swells up and it dies. Because the food that the pigeon needs is particular to what it needs. And you give it what it does not need and it won't satisfy that pigeon or that bird. Right? If you give me poison, I will die. But there are some animals like koala bears, they eat eucalyptus leaves, which apparently may be poisonous to you and me. But that's what it needs. And so if you and I give our souls what it needs to be nourished, we're going to have to feed it what it needs to survive and to thrive and to flourish. And the dunya, with all due respect to it, is not the nourishment that the soul needs, my brothers and sisters. The dunya cannot ever, no matter how long you live in this world, and no matter how much money, and no matter how much wealth you acquire, it is never going to satisfy the human soul, and the soul will begin to die. It will literally, not metaphorically, it will literally atrophy, it will die. Because you've not fed it with what it needs. And the Quran tells us it needs the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to survive. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. It is only God that satisfies the human soul. I've said this many times, but now I'm going to give you something new. Right? It's all about what's new these days, right? We need to entertain ourselves, so let's inshallah entertain ourselves with something new today. It's going to be a little difficult though to understand. Help me explain this with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Quran suggests to us that those who fall in love with the material world, with money, with power and wealth, right, what happens to them? Amir al-Mu'mineen has told us that he has divorced this world 3 times. He divorced, he did talaq to the world. Telling us that it is forbidden for him to fall in love with this world. It's haram on him now to make the dunya his lover, his beloved. But the Quran tells us that those who fall in love with power, wealth, fortune, these limited things of the world, they will eventually have a inferiority complex. It's a psychology term. I hope I pronounce it properly. Right? They will begin to constantly see themselves as inadequate. Have you heard of keeping up with the Joneses? If that is my goal, to just acquire wealth and power and fame, you will get it, you'll reach your destination, and then you'll look at your neighbor and you will see, wow, they have something bigger than me. Right? They have bigger muscles than I do. They have more fame than I do. Right? Do we think it's a coincidence that these Hollywood movie stars fall apart when they grow old? Or that their families disintegrate? I would like to know the statistics about those who chase after fame and fortune. What happens to their actual real lives when all of it begins to fall apart? They become insecure individuals. Today we are commemorating the Shahada of Imām Ḥasan al Askari alayhi salatu wasalam. The zalim of our 11th Imam, the zalim of his time, was a man named Mutawakkil. And what did Mutawakkil do? He was in charge of essentially one of the greatest powers on the face of the earth. Enormous amounts of wealth, large armies. And yet, he was such a feeble little man that this one man from Ali Muhammad terrified him, that he dragged him from his home to a place known as Samarra, to a military garrison surrounded by soldiers. You know, that's why our Imam is called Al Askari. Why? Was he a soldier? No, he was not a soldier, but he was surrounded by weapons and swords and those who would threaten his life. Then how often did this Mutawakkil barge into his house in the middle of the night, where his women and his children and himself are trying to have some privacy, and he checks them to see if they're planning and plotting any revolution. And he would constantly check the wife of the loved one of Imam Ḥasan al Askari. Why? Because in his mind he remembers there's a hadith of Rasulullah that says that the 12th grandson, the 12th generation of Imams, the last one will be a man with my namesake. His name will be Muhammad and he will be the Mahdi. And he will bring justice to this world. And so Mutawakkil looks at himself and he realizes that I'm a zalim, I'm unjust, and so I better watch out for this Mahdi. That na'udhu, right? God forbid that he undoes my rule and my power. Insecure people. If you have it all, then live as if you are all powerful. Live as if you will live forever. But these weak individuals are the weakest because they have fallen in love with the dunya, thinking that the dunya will give them power and wealth and prestige. And in the end, they realize it gave them nothing at all. The Quran tells us about a group of people known as the Banu Israel. The Banu Israel were a group of people that, as you know, the Quran speaks about them more than any other people. And you need to keep this in mind. When the Quran repeats something over and over again, or gives them as examples to us, it means something. And here's the secret. It means that in the later days, the Ummah of Rasulullah will have this problem that they had. And so pay attention. Find out how they were. Maybe you will suffer from this. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide you and I from this, inshallah. The Banu Israel were subjugated by a very powerful, strong scary man by the name of Fir'aun. He made them his slaves, right? Countless number of Banu Israel, they would build his military garrisons, his big buildings, his pyramids, right? Some of you probably have been to Egypt and you've seen what these pharaohs used to enjoy. Right? And so he had so much of these workers under him building what he wanted. And Banu Israel are watching. They're seeing how this man, he stands very tall with very amazing armor and big hats, big topis on his head, mashallah. See how he walks through the parade with so much confidence, so much dignity. He sees the women dressed in so many jewels and rubies and emeralds. They see his amazing palaces. They're watching all of this, thinking that this is a very powerful man. But the Quran tells us that this so-called powerful man was also a little tiny, insignificant human being. When his soothsayers, his magicians, you understand these magicians, we bring them to our birthday parties. And they bring rabbits out of hats. But these magicians, they tell Fir'aun something actually that he could have guessed by himself if he used his intellect. That one day, one of these Banu Israel are going to undermine your kingdom, your rule. And so what did this little man do? He decides that he is going to separate the men and women from each other. We cannot have anyone give birth. God forbid that a little boy would be born that will undermine my rule. And he finds any newborn children and he murders them, massacres them, kills them. Some narrations say that he would kill every other household, every other child in every other household. Some say that he would take turns, 1 week this, 1 week that. He's afraid of little babies, right? This is Fir'aun. In the midst of all of this story, we'll jump ahead and we will see that how Prophet Musa, he is able to emancipate Banu Israel and save them. And so now they are leaving Egypt on their way to the shores of the Red Sea. The Banu Israel now have been a part of the story the entire time. And as they reach the shores, they see that in front of them is water as far as the eye can see. And behind them is a tyrannical ruler who is coming with maybe thousands of soldiers. Ahadith say thousands of soldiers were in the army of Fir'aun. And so they tell Prophet Musa, "Oh Musa, you promised us that God would protect us. Have you lied to us? Have you turned your back on us?" This is the faith of Banu Israel. We'll get back to them in just a bit. So Prophet Musa said, "No, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will find a way out for us. He has promised us victory over the Zalimun." And so as you know, the story goes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs Prophet Musa to strike his staff upon the sea. And what happens? The sea, what happens? It splits into two. Just imagine, you are the Banu Israel, and you're seeing in front of your eyes demonstrated the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it is said that Banu Israel even then said, "Musa, we cannot go, we are afraid." Musa said, "Why?" He said, "Because we are afraid that if we walk into the seabed, we might sink in the bottom." Prophet Musa said, "I command you to go and save yourselves." They said, "No, we cannot." A hadith say that that he summoned, again, this is the wilayah taqweeniya of the awliya. He summoned a wind to come and dry the seabed. And so now the seabed is dry. And then he says, "I command you, go and save yourselves." So finally, after some time, they said, "Fine, we will go." There's actually many other things that they did. I will skip that. And many other reasons why they hesitated in obeying the command of the Prophet of God. They get to the other side, and it is said that Fir'aun is charging through the middle. Again, he is also witnessing the sign of God's power, the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But his anger, his infinite infidelity. His lack of faith makes him blind. That all he wants is to demonstrate his material power over these enemies of his. That these Banu Israel belong to me. And so what happens? The Quran tells us that he's now charging through, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the sea to collapse in on itself. The Quran says that as he was drowning, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قَالَ آمَنْتُ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا الَّذِي آمَنَتْ بِهِ بَنُو إِسْرَائِيلِ. When he is drowning, and when the water has reached his throat, and he realizes now it is the end, that is when Fir'aun says, I believe, I submit that there is no God except whatever Banu Israel believe in. Right? This is the faith of Fir'aun. Right? Hopefully it's appropriate to say that someone once forwarded me a clip from the show Simpsons. Okay, do you know the Simpsons? Alhamdulillah, you don't know what Simpsons are. Let me tell you what the Simpsons are. Simpsons has a character by the name of Homer, right? He's the very typical deadbeat dad that was common throughout the 90s and the 2000s. He is in trouble where this rhinoceros is going to come and kill him. And so he runs into a little porta potty and he makes dua. Homer Simpson, this is the dua of the Simpsons. He says, Allah, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Vishnu, I love you all. Save me. Right? Because someone, and this is actually very important, it's a very beautiful example. Because someone who is scared for their life, someone who is drowning, or someone who is burning, at that point, it's not about haqq or truth or sincerity or turning to God. It's just, I realize I'm dead. Please save me. Somebody help me. Even if it's an alien from outer space, I don't care. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not accept and he rejected the so-called tawbah of Fir'aun, of the Pharaoh. Not because his tawbah was sincere. Any sincere tawbah by anyone, it will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma inni as'aluka birahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. The mercy of God encompasses all things. If Fir'aun was sincere, it would have happened. But Fir'aun was not sincere at all. He was still blindly in love with his own material possessions. And this material possession that he wanted so badly was now his body. He wanted to save it. All right, we've talked enough about Fir'aun. He's done. He's finished. Now Bani Israel, they are now on the other side, on the Levant, heading towards the promised land. And they see a group of people, and it's very interesting. The group of people that they see, remember these were a subjugated people for how long? They see a group of people, probably dressed very nicely, have very fancy clothes, colorful outfits, confident culture. He sees that they are doing what? Worshipping what? Idols. They're worshipping idols. And Banu Israel see this. And Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam tells us that their feet had not even dried yet. Banu Israel, their feet were still dry. Their feet were still wet when they looked at Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, the wali of God, and they looked at Musa and says, can you make us an idol and a God that we can worship the way they are worshiping it? Are you kidding right now? Are you joking? You just saw this prophet of God split the sea. You saw him make a staff into a snake. You saw him make light come from his hand. And there's other parts of the story. You saw him make from the sky fall down food for you to eat, manna wa salwa. It is said that when these birds fell from the sky already cooked for them, those that they were not wanting to eat, it is said that Allah made them become back alive and they flew away. They're seeing this. The question is, what made these people this way? That they had the Prophet of God in front of them, even demonstrating the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our scholars, they say it is this inferiority complex. That yes, and this is very important, do not think that materialism is only a problem for the rich. Some of the poorest individuals are some of the most materialistic individuals. Because as they were being subjugated by Fir'aun, his slaves, they are looking up to Fir'aun and they're saying, wow, look at that throne. Look at that building. Amazing. Wow. Right? If you don't have faith in God, you will find something to worship. And sadly, these people who were subjugated by this evil, crooked man, subconsciously they are now worshiping him. And so now they are an immigrant community coming to a new place, and because they have no real faith of their own, they look at the fancy dresses and the fancy buildings and the fancy stuff of these people, and they say, we want to be like them. I see the fancy Instagram posts and the YouTube videos and the celebrities, and I want to be like them. Now, we shouldn't demonize people. Maybe there are some celebrities which are fine, which are great people, wholesome people. I don't know. Right? But here's the problem. When you then take their values, which are contrary to haqq and truth, because you are impressed with the dunya that they have in their pocket, that is where the danger lies, my brothers and sisters. And so Bani Israel, because they had no real faith of their own, they did not inculcate and value their relationship with God and the values that the Prophet of God gave them. Even though they had the messenger of God who performed mu'jizat next to them, they valued the dunya much more. And this is a problem for us as well. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi. There's nothing wrong with the dunya. There's nothing wrong with that. You've said it so many times, you're probably sick of me saying this. But the dunya is not the criteria for our aspirations and who we look up to and who are our imams. We cannot subconsciously make Fir'aun our imam. We cannot subconsciously make anybody. I don't mean to insult anyone, but no one is our imam except for Amir al-Mu'mineen, except for Imam Ali alayhi salam, because those are those who are chosen by God. And those whom God chooses, sometimes they are unbelievably rich. Nabi Sulaiman had castles made of glass. I don't even know what that means. Right? The Quran says that he had a castle of glass, and when the Queen of Sheba came, she looked at the ground and she picked up her dress, thinking that she was about to step in water. This was the power and the wealth of a prophet of God, Nabi Dawood. He had a great kingdom, a very powerful kingdom. But sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us you're going to follow Hazrat Yusuf. Hazrat Yusuf was a slave. He was a slave of the Egyptians, of the Pharaoh. He had virtually nothing. But if this slave comes to us and tells us what to do, we will follow it. We will do as we are commanded. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he was not wealthy, especially in the beginning of his life. He was not wealthy. Abu Talib actually had a great struggle when it came to, although he was extremely noble, recognized even by the Quraysh for his nobility, but he had a struggle. This is why he gave his children to other members of his family to take care of. He kept one, another kept one, and then Rasulullah says, I want Ali ibn Abi Talib in my home. So that's why he had it. Recite salawat, please. But the Prophet was not rich, he was not wealthy. The only time he had any wealth at all is when his wife made him rich. You know, subhanAllah, really, some of us, not in this room, but there are some men who, they actually get very insecure that their wife is wealthier than they are, or their wife has a more lucrative job than they do. Right? I mean, this is a kind of feebleness and inferiority complex that I'm talking about. If it was okay for the Prophet, it should be okay for you and me as well. Lady Khadija, of course, became bankrupt, giving that wealth in the way of her beloved messenger of God. Right? And that extreme wealth that she had, which made her richer than every other merchant caravan in Arabia combined. That's how successful she was. And the Prophet was extremely grateful for the fact that she used that wealth for the sake of this religion. We should not be insecure. Now, of course, we use that wealth, both husbands and wives, for the sake of our families. And so we should never, ever allow any career or any person or any this or any that interfere with the goal of Islam, which is to raise good families. Right? And so we have to be thoughtful about how we spend our time and who works and who doesn't. But let's say the scenario is such that this makes sense. We need to get over ourselves. This is not anyone in this room, but generally speaking, if we look to the dunya and material wealth as our source of dignity and izzah and honor and glory, then yes, we're going to have a hard time if our wives are smarter than us or make more money than us, or maybe they inherited more wealth. But if we look to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our dignity, then it doesn't matter whether you have it or I have it or none of us have it. Because honor is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Recite salawat, please. This is why the Quran, when it speaks about the Bani Israel in Surah Yasin, قَالُوا مَا أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُنَا. We're not going to obey you because you're just like us. Right? Look at your clothes. Where's your Gucci and your Armani? Right? Where are your enormous armies? Where are your mountains of gold? Where are your enormous elephants and tanks and weapons? And this is what the Banu Israel thought would make someone worthy of leadership. And this is why, my brothers and sisters, the Islamic world, one of the reasons why it is in such shambles today is because so many of the Muslim world think that the honor of Islam is in the military conquests. That we took over this many people, we subjugated this many people. They even think, now please listen very carefully. I don't want to create any misunderstanding. They even think that the Khilafah is our honor and our glory, and we need to bring that back. What did Imam Ali say about the Khilafah? About sitting on a throne on top of the Muslim world? He said, this means less to me than the sneeze of a goat. Right? I'm tying my shoes. He was fixing his sandals. This means more to me than this rulership. Unless, of course, with the caveat that this throne can be used for justice, to stand up for the oppressed, the mustad'afeen, the mazlumeen. Then it has its value. But I promise you, do not think that this caliphate gave Amir al-Mu'mineen some honor. It was Amir al-Mu'mineen who finally gave honor to this khilafah. That is where the honor came from a great, incredible man of virtue and honor and iman, finally giving this. You know what Imam Sajjad says when he asked for Yazid the opportunity to say a few words? He says, allow me to stand on these blocks of wood. And then when he looked at it, it was the minbar. It was the minbar. But because it was in the hand of Yazid, this is not a minbar of Rasulullah. This is just some junk that you've piled together. And that must have been the most ornate minbar you could ever imagine. Probably jewels all over the place. Right? Made of gold, perhaps. Gold plated, 24 carats. And Imam Sajjad says these are sticks and piles of wood. Because power doesn't mean anything independently of iman and faith, nor does wealth, nor does any other matter of the dunya. Recite salawat ala Muhammad. This is why Umar ibn Sa'ad, I give this example again as a reminder and tadhkira. Umar ibn Sa'ad was a man whose values demonstrate who he truly is. On the 3rd of Muharram until the 9th of Muharram, Umar ibn Sa'ad was in negotiation with Imam Hussein to try to stop the battle from taking place. He knew his Imam. He knew that we should not be murdering innocents, let alone the grandson of the Prophet of God. But because that letter came from Ibn Ziyad in the hands of Shimr ibn al-Jawshan al-La'in, that you will either get Hussein's bay'ah, or you will kill Hussein, or you will forget having any chance at the governorship of Ray. Ray is a kind of ancient city in Khorasan that corresponds to Tehran today in Iran. You want the jewels and the prestige and the honor and the glory? Do what you've been commanded. And because he had that unconditional love for the dunya, but that conditional love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his representative and the values of truth, he made his decision. And he was the first to make an arrow fly at the body of Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura. Now I know that sometimes we come on the minbar and we sound very extreme. And Maulana, chill out, I'm just enjoying, my stuff, and that's fine. Enjoy the dunya. But don't fall in love with the dunya. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to test you and make you make a choice between what you love and your imam, or what you love and your faith, or what you love and what is truly important, God forbid that we make that error and we choose the wrong thing because we were in love with the wrong values, with the wrong ideals, that we worship the wrong God. We worship the material God, the God of the Benjamin Franklins and the Thomas Jeffersons, or we worship the God of fame and notoriety, that I want to be someone, that I'm volunteering for the masjid because, I want to be recognized. God forbid. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi. Where does our honor come from? The Quran tells us, نَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He breathed into the children of Adam His ruh, His soul. This is a creation of God, but that creation of God is what ties us to the higher realms. If we are not tied to the higher realms, we are exactly what the atheists say we are. We are just a bunch of small little molecular bowling balls bumping into each other. Today, the number of stories and movies and all of these stories that are basically nihilistic in nature. There is no meaning. It doesn't matter. Just get over it. Who cares? Right? It was Nietzsche, the famous German thinker, who used to say this, that God is dead because we killed him. And if we not kill God, no one can touch Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if we kill our relationship with God, that only one source of our dignity that makes us any different than rocks and stones and maybe donkeys and animals and monkeys, that is severed. Because dignity comes from that relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you have that relationship with God, you don't need any of the dunya. If the dunya comes, you say, Alhamdulillah, let me use it. Shaykh Azhar needs a new pair of shoes. Here you go, right? Or you use it for something valuable, right? You serve your community with it. Give gifts to your children. Provide your wife something to make her feel special. Come to the masjid and spend a little money fixing the walls and taking care of the building. There are those who are in need on the streets. and maybe give a little bit to them, and then give a lot to those organizations that can help bring these people up and facilitate the process of them being independent and having their own dignity and honor. That's where our honor comes from. And that's why when Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam, when he was the Khalifa, again, the ruler of essentially what is likely the most powerful nation on earth at the time, he would not spend a lot of time in these, Dar al-Imara and these buildings, these corridors of power, like his predecessors, but he would instead be outside on the streets of Kufa. So one day, Ibn Shahr Ashub narrates that a woman came. She was a Khariji woman. And in one hand, there were like a big bag of groceries. And in her other hand were she was holding children in her arms. And she's walking and she's complaining, she's having a hard time. And really, I think the story is important that we remind ourselves that there are many examples of single mothers or those who are raising children on their own, and we need to be sympathetic and helpful and provide any assistance if they need that. If they don't need that, then of course we don't impose ourselves. But we should offer opportunities for being helpful, actually not to them, but for ourselves, really. When we be helpful to others, really the beneficiary is us. So she's complaining about her state, and so Amir al-Mu'minin walks up to her, and she doesn't seem to recognize who this is. The Imam says, "Can I be of help to you?" The woman says, "Yes, please, thank you so much. It's so nice to see someone kind. Because that Ali ibn Abi Talib, he's made my life miserable." So the Imam said, "Oh, okay. What did he do?" The woman said that he sent my husband off to die in one of his wars, and he has done nothing for us, and now I'm struggling with these children, and I don't know what to do, and I can barely make ends meet. So the Imam said, "Okay, can I help you with anything?" She said, "No, I'm going home." It is said that the Imam finds out where she lives, and he and Qambar come to this lady's house, and he brings with him a sack of meat and food and some dates with some meat in it. It was kind of a delicacy that they would enjoy. So he comes in with permission from the woman, and he says, "I just brought a few things. If I can be helpful to you, please let me know what I can do." So she's very grateful. "Thank you so much, very kind of you. Please just help me light the oven, the stove, and then I will take care of the cooking. You just watch my children, please." So the Imam lights the stove, and he feels the flame kind of hit his face. And this is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Right? He is the one who is going to be the one to separate those from heaven and hell. He says, "Oh Ali, feel the fire that will burn those who are neglectful to the widows and the orphans." So he closes the oven, and then he goes to the children, and it is said that he took out these dates with meat inside of it, and he began feeding these children with his own hands. And then some accounts say that he began playing with them, this game where he would pretend to be a goat or an animal, and he would put them on his back, the same way that Rasulullah used to play this with Imam Ḥasan and Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala. To make the long story short, the Imam is playing and enjoying when another woman comes into the house and says to the widow, "Do you not know who is in your home right now? This is the commander of the faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He's the Khalifa of the Muslim world, and he's in your home. What is he doing here?" The Khariji woman turns to the Imam and begs for forgiveness. "Oh, commander of the faithful, you are so powerful, you are so great. I'm so sorry when I said those mean words. I didn't mean it. I was angry." The Imam says, "There's nothing to apologize for. I am going to apologize to you because I was your Imam, I was your leader, and I failed in my responsibility to you. Right? This is power. Real power is spiritual power. The power to assist and to help and to humble themselves in front of their responsibilities with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One more loud salawat, please. This is what real and true power and honor is. That a man or a woman who lives faithfully, they will live for not the glittering things of this dunya. It's fine if they have it, enjoy, use it, all good. But what they will really live for are the true blessings of God, the ni'mat that God has given them. And what can be more beautiful of a blessing than to have a beautiful family? And those who have a beautiful family, they can be the poorest people on earth, and there's smiles on their faces. But those who have difficult marriages, difficult times raising their children, they can have everything, but they are miserable. May Allah protect us, inshallah, and give us beautiful spouses, wonderful husbands, great children, inshallah. But Imam Hussein also loved his family and his children. It is said that on the day of Ashura, after Imam Hussein had lost everyone, they're all gone now. Our Imam made 3 calls. He called out, Hal min nasirin yansurna. Is there anyone to help us? And then he said, Hal min mu'inin yu'inuna. Is there anyone to answer our call for aid? He sends Ali Azhar to the Maidan. Ali Azhar has not returned, except in his arms lifeless. It is said that now Imam Hussein made a 3rd call. Hal min dhabin yadhubbu an haram Rasulillah. Is there anyone who will come and defend the haram of the Prophet? What is a haram, brothers and sisters? It is something sacred. The Kaaba, the land outside of the Kaaba is a haram. The land that surrounds Imam Hussein's shrine is a haram. But why is it that when Imam Hussein referred to his women and his children, he uses this word haram? Because they were sacred to him. So much so that Imam Rida is now in the Majlis of Di'b al-Khuza'i, who is reciting the Musibah of Ahl al-Bayt. And he is reciting the Musibah of Ali Akbar and Qasim and Abbas, alayhimus salatu wassalam, and he's weeping. But then when he came to the Masa'ib of Masa'ib, it is said that he took off his turban and he placed it on the ground. And he began to call out, Wa Husayna, Wa Husayna. Because he knew that of all of the musibahs, it was the musibah of Masa'ib that broke the heart of Imam Hussein more than anything else. The musibah of Lady Sukaina. Knowing what will happen to them, my brothers and sisters, listen to the words of Imam Mahdi reciting Ziyarat Nahiya. When Imam Hussein was lying on the ground, he was unable to move, and Shimr ibn al-Jawshan is now approaching Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Imam Mahdi says he was not looking at Shimr. Do you know what he was looking? He was looking out of the corner of his eye to the tents of the women and the children. He was worried deeply about what will happen to my beloved women and children after I am to become a shaheed. On the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein is not worried about what will happen to me. He is worried about what will happen to my Sukaina. The order now came, and understand the agony of when these women and children were now tied in ropes and chains, paraded to the Maidan. They saw their men lying headless on the plains of Karbala. They saw their husbands. They saw their brothers. They saw their fathers lying there. And it is said that the enemy narrates that I heard one cry, one shriek that was so loud that after that I could not sleep at night. Brothers and sisters, this was Lady Zainab salamullahi alayha when she sees the body of Imam Hussein lying there headless on the plains of Karbala. Brothers and sisters, she falls from her horse. It is said that there were at least two who, when they fell from their horses, they fell upon their faces. One was Hazrat Abu Fadl al-Abbas, for when he fell from his horse, he did not have hands to brace his fall. And the other was Lady Zainab, for when she fell, seeing the body of Imam Hussein, her hands were shackled in chains. She falls upon the sands of Karbala. She now crawls to the body of Abu Abdullah alayhi salatu wassalam. We come now to Sham. In Sham, the Ahlul Bayt, they were placed in a dark dungeon of Yazid. What was this dungeon like, my brothers and sisters? It is said that this was an underground dungeon. And now Imam Sajjad is watching Lady Zainab finish her Salatul Layl. Imam Sajjad now sees that his aunt has now finished. She says, my aunt, I'm not used to I'm not used to seeing you pray Salatul Layl while you're sitting down. Lady Zainab says, my Imam, they give us such little food to eat, we give all of it to the children. And so I do not even have the strength to stand up when I'm praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, it is said that this underground prison, this dungeon, had an open roof. And so when the sun would shine, it would not protect the Ali Muhammad from the heat, nor would it protect them from the cold. And so little Lady Sukaina is looking up and she sees some birds flying up open of this roof. And so Lady Sukaina asked Lady Zainab, oh Zainab, my aunt, where do you think these birds are going to? Lady Zainab says, oh my child, these birds must be going home. They must be going back to their families, to their nests. Lady Sukaina says, oh my aunt Zainab, why is it that these birds can go home, but why is it that I cannot go back to Medina? Why is it that I cannot go back to the grave of my great-grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? It is said that Lady Sukaina began to weep so much, my brothers and sisters. Ayn al-walidi al-Hussein. Where is my Baba Hussein? Where is my father Hussein? That when the women and the children of the family of the Prophet are hearing this little daughter, the 4-year-old Amana of Imam Hussein crying, they all begin to cry. They all begin to weep. The streets of Sham can hear the weeping of women and children. Yazid is now worried about revolution in Sham. And so he says, oh my guards, do something to pacify this family. Give them what they want. It is said that the prison guards that were guarding the prison cell of Lady Sukaina, they bring in a silver platter. The child thinks it's food. She says, I don't want food. I don't want whatever it is that you're giving me. I want my father. And they remove the cloth from the platter. And imagine the musibah, brothers and sisters. The 4-year-old daughter comes to the head of Imam Hussein. She says, oh my father, when I see you this way, I do not know how will you wipe my tears away. When I see you in this state, I do not know how you will put me to sleep like you used to do. Where is your chest, O my father, that I used to sleep upon at night when they have separated this blessed head of yours from your body? I wish I had died. Lady Sukaina says in a narration, I wish I had left this world before seeing you in this way. She is now weeping so loudly. She falls to the ground. Imam Sajjad sees her go unconscious. Brothers and sisters, for 33 years Imam Sajjad wept. And the companions say, oh, our Imam, isn't it time for you to stop your crying now? We are worried about your health. We are worried about your well-being. Imam Sajjad says, oh, my companions, you have not been fair to me. For Yaqub cried so much that he became blind. And he cried for his son who he knew had not yet died. But when I cry for the 17 men of my family that I had to bury with my own hands. And I cry for the 4-year-old Imana of Imam Hussein that I had to bury in the dungeons of Sham. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Wa saya'alamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalibin yanqalibun. Mata bi Hussein. Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.